It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com. I probably should have done those in a different order. Probably should have done the commercial first and then the introduction to the show, because it's not that clear that that's the introduction to the show. But I'm still working on our intros here as we dig in. Production comes second to content. So welcome everybody to our Daily Gun Show. We come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern. We talk about guns for about an hour. Each night we have a different focus, a different topic. As you know, on Mondays, our goal is to inspire and to motivate folks who are activists, to encourage you to value your voice, your abilities out there to help spread the word and to be ambassadors for gun ownership and the rights that we've all got, right? So we also like to look behind the scenes and look at the tools and the social platforms and the techniques and the networking and the collaborations and the ways and the methods that we are activists. And to that end, as often as possible, I interview Second Amendment activists out there. And I think of this as a second interview, because a lot of times activists are brought onto a show for their perspective or their expertise or their point of view on something. Maybe they live in an area or have some insight into something that's happening, and they're able to talk about that. They're thanked for being an expert, and then they're moved on so that they could talk about whatever the next 10-minute segment's focus is. And I like to think of this show as an opportunity for the activists to extrapolate on three questions: who they are, what they're doing quickly, then why they do what they do, and then how they do what they're doing. So tonight we've got Sharyn Hinchcliffe. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, it's Hinchcliffe. You got it.
Thank you. And you're from Washington State. I'm going to let you have the beginning of the show here. I also follow the style of James Kalita. Are you familiar with James Kalita?
Doesn't sound familiar.
He has a podcast. Had a podcast called the Out of Order Podcast. It was my favorite podcast when he was doing it. He would literally go 20 minutes with a Second Amendment activist, only Second Amendment activists, and he would give them 20 minutes or as long as they wanted. But he would say, "I'm here with Sharyn, thanks for joining us, go." And then you would just have 20 minutes or however long you wanted to extrapolate on whatever you wanted. And I just thought that was so cool to just let people chat and not have to bounce around to topics or have some kind of spoiler speech. So anyway, I'm following that style. I'm going to be shutting up here. I'll give you some time to just describe quickly, if you would, who you are, what you're doing, but really then the next question I'll ask is why you do what you do, and then give you as much time as possible or as you'd like to get into that. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's always been wonderful to chat with you and for anybody else. So I've been an activist for nearly almost a decade, just about. In Washington, it was 594 that I started getting active and really seeing what was going on in Washington. I'd always been involved with civil rights and things like that. I've been involved with it since I've known how critical it's been for the defense of civil rights. For those who aren't aware, I am the daughter of an FBI agent who was actually an SAC, Special Agent in Charge. My dad's last division or last assignment was Arizona. So he was the SAC of Arizona. Previously, he was the SAC of San Juan, Puerto Rico, which was the entire Greater Antilles, so the entire Caribbean island change. He was always, even with the Bureau has very much a multiple personality when it comes to civil rights. That's the best way I explain it. we can go into another time for some of the history that I'm aware of with the Bureau, including some of the stuff that's going on now, but that's not what we're talking about now. So I'd always been involved and always paid attention and everything else. So when polls happened, at the time and everything, that's when I was livid. I have family who are in the community and who live in the greater Orlando area. So that could have been a family member of mine. Even though now they say that it was the purpose of why he did what he did was not specifically targeting the LGBTQ community, at the time it was. So the Pacific Northwest, specifically Washington at this time, was not known for being pro-Second Amendment, especially in Western Washington, around the greater Puget Sound area. So we're talking from Bellingham, Everett, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, all along that whole section right there. And so I did some research to try to find out, hey, how can I get involved with the community for shooting and things like that? And especially within the LGBT community, to help make sure that people knew what their rights were. So did some searching, found about then was the Seattle chapter of Pink Pistols, and they were trying to get it back up, trying to get it reformulated. Got involved with 2 of the other 3 admins that were there, and we're the ones who were there just about every single time. We expanded it from just the Seattle to also the Tacoma. Seattle and Tacoma are about 35, 40 miles apart from each other. So for me, that's not too long of a distance. I know some people on the East Coast think, oh my God, 40 miles is a long, not here, not with the freeways. And so that's how I started getting involved. And then started getting involved with going down to Olympia to be a voice of somebody against all the gun control bills. And that's pretty much where that started from. And how I got involved with Pink Pistols and how I ended up being one of the 3 admins. At the time, because of the living situation, I wasn't going to lose my housing if it came out that I was involved with firearms and firearm education and firearm safety. And I wasn't going to lose my job. So of the 3 admins, I became the public face. That's how it started for that part of it. And with it, with just being with the chapter and everything else. So every time we'd go down to Olympia, ended up meeting the other activists who had been down there, going down there on an annual basis for the time that the legislative session is operational. Then come to find out that in order to really get a seat and get your name involved, you have to get there early. How early? Let's see. The hearing would start at between 10 and 10:30, depending on what the scheduling was going on beforehand. The doors of the building don't open until 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. We were getting in line in front of the building between 4:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning in January in Olympia, which is Washington's capital. In the snow, in the rain, in the sleet, we're there because that was the only way. It's first come, first serve for who gets to sit, and then for being called on for how you have your names and how they call people. Generally, if you're not impaneled by the lobbyist, meaning NRA, ILA, not NRA, just NRA, it's ILA who's a part of this. That is the lobbying side. That's who impanels you to be able to speak right after the legislators or the individuals who write the bills and speak about the bills. That's a guaranteed spot to be able to speak. You would have between 2.5 to 3 minutes sometimes to be able to speak. If you were not impaneled, there would be a time that it would be 90 seconds, 60 seconds to speak. You had to have a speech or statement on point to the legislators, to the committee hearing in that time frame. You had to be able to cut it. So that's how I ended up being involved on the political side. Anybody who's ever heard me speak during the committee sessions knows I am a firebrand. You have restrictions on, you cannot call out a legislator by name. You cannot call out or denigrate anybody on the opposing side, period. They will shut you down. They will, and you will not be allowed to speak. Those are the ground rules for this. You are not allowed to bring any props. You are not allowed to have anything. You can hand material over to the support staff, but you cannot have anything with you when you're speaking. That's it. You can have papers that you're reading off of, but you cannot have anything that's a prop. It will be removed. So no buttons. Buttons sometimes. T-shirts can be printed because they think that you have it. So this is how Moms Demand and every town do their whole thing, because they'll have shirts that they'll pull over everything else. You can wear the shirts. So we started, and they would
have a giant men's huge shirt, and then whatever they're wearing, they can pull that shirt over the outside of everything.
Yes. And that's what they would do. Sometimes they would just wear that, and they would have like a white collared shirt underneath it or something like that. Or that would just be their only shirt. Or they would have a scarf, because you can have a scarf because it's understandable. It's January. It's cold here. Not uncommon for the temperatures in the daytime to be in the high 30s, low 40s. So this is winter, and this is storm weather and everything else in the Pacific Northwest. So also, no hats are allowed. This is like going to a courtroom, is the best way I can describe it. You can have things like that. Now, some people, you're allowed to have a laptop, because some people are typing up stuff. But they don't like it when you have stickers on your laptop, as they ended up manipulating the chairs and everything else, because they didn't like the fact that we got there so early that we broke up the line of orange shirts or red shirts from every town in Moms Demand. We prevented them from having their whole solid line, and they were livid over it. There would be times that gun rights of the Gun Rights Responsibility, which is very much a pro gun control group, would just be absolutely complaining and livid the fact that they couldn't get there to be in the first 3 rows.
Is that the kind of group that would be, people say, bust in, or like,
yes.
In other words, like, I mean, half the time that though can be like a church group or a civic organization or a group that's at a school, PTA or something, bunch of like-minded folks that say, hey, let's commute effectively. Well, I'll meet up at this mall or something at the parking lot there where our cars will be safe. And then we take a shuttle bus over to where we need to be, because otherwise we got to all be parking and fighting all the other potential city traffic and stuff. So that whole idea of being bus doesn't mean that they're necessarily on the payroll. But that being said, are we talking people that are on the payroll, or are we talking
we're talking people who are not on the payroll? They're volunteers, but they are provided coffee, they're provided food, they're provided lunch afterwards and breakfast beforehand. So they're
professional protesters? Like that's what the, whatever the topic is, they're there because they know that's the deal. It's like being a paid.
Most of them
actor.
are gun control supporters.
I shouldn't say actor, but like the support actors, people that know you can go be in the background of movies and you get fed half the time pretty well, and you get paid sometimes. And if you're going to be an actor, maybe you get a speaking role. Is it that kind of thing where people are like, hey, this is my hobby. I show up, I get fed, I get to meet people that hate guns. It's great.
For some people, probably is. I would not put it past it, because we see the same people over and over again. They know who we are. We know who they are on site. And we've heard their speeches. They've heard our speeches.
Oh, okay. So this is the coyote and the sheepdog punching in.
Oh, yeah.
Fighting each other, punching back out and saying, we'll see you next week.
That's very, very much like that on how it is. We know who they are, and they hate us.
But you can also kind of tell, oh, they brought more people to this one, and oh, they didn't bring as many people to this one, and they're doing the same.
They will always have somebody there. They have stay-at-home moms, retirees, and they will always have somebody there. The majority of the people in the 2A community have jobs, are working. You don't have your retirees. You don't have the individuals who are looking for a cause or something to do outside of what they did beforehand. So they do this instead. They'll make the phone calls and things like, they'll volunteer on the phone banks. They'll go down and do a lot of this stuff. Their volunteer base is not as large as the 2A community is at times, but they're more available, if that makes sense. And so you'll see the same, but they're there because these legislative hearings are during the work week. They're Monday through Friday. They're during business hours. And for the gun control bills, these are the most heated. We get the largest responses of people showing up outside of very, very specific targeted bills in Washington. They went after the hairdressers, cosmetologists one year, and they scheduled the hearing for this committee hearing to be on a Monday. Well, most salons are closed on a Monday, so they had 4,000 people down there against the bill that was going to be penalizing them. So that's how they were just able to organize. They had a group, they had phone numbers, and they played phone tag. And the whole thing of, there was a commercial years ago in the 1970s and 1980s from a shampoo called Wellabossom. And it's like, you love how this hair works and everything, how the shampoo works. So you tell 2 friends. Those 2 friends tell 2 other friends. So you tell 4. Those 4 people tell 2 more. So you're up to 8. For those 8, tell 4 more. You're up to 16. It expands that way. And that's how they're able to bring in people on this. So with the advent of just trying to get people organized here in Washington, 2 individuals, some people in Washington state will know who these are. And the first one is, Dan Mitchell from Sporting Systems, who is the largest FFL in the state down in Vancouver, Washington. He would drive up from Vancouver, which is about 2.5 hours one way, to Olympia for these hearings. And then another individual by the name of Curtis Bingham, who owns a firearms training company called Adventure Protection. He primarily teaches women, specifically a lot of victims of domestic violence, how to shoot and how to be safe and things like that with firearms. They decided a few years ago to set up a group called the Washington Civil Rights Association. And that was bringing people from the leaderships of all the different 2A organizations within Washington and focusing specifically on Washington.
And was that out of frustration, or was that for some other motivation?
One, to try to get people to be knowledgeable about what to say, what to speak. The antis will coach people how to speak. They will have a speech set up, and then they just like change tiny little things to match for that bill. Sometimes it doesn't, their personal stories don't match what will happen, but they will do that. And we would get a lot of people saying my rights, this or that, and Constitution. Doesn't always work when you talk about these particular things. And they've heard it all. I've been going down to Olympia now for, even with the lockdowns, because I did it remote sessions, for going on 7 years. And
you're talking to politicians have heard it all.
The politicians have heard it all. They've heard, and these are the same people I have spoken to for the last 7 years. They know what, and so coming up with something specifically to approach the bill that they were submitting and to try to get it passed. So this was to try to get it organized, and it was also to try to get a heads up on what bills were going to be heard when. We don't find, according to the way the lobbying and everything else works, the notification of when these bills are going to be heard in committee is 72 hours. That's how much lead time you have. So we would find out on a Thursday or a Friday that a bill was going to be heard Monday morning. A lot of people can't get that time off from work because it's too short notice. So you have everybody else trying to scramble to get there, to be there. The other, and that information goes out to the lobbyist. So it goes out to the gun control side, and it goes out to the pro 2A side at the same time. So everyone's like, great, we're down there.
All right, I want to take because we've chatted a lot, and I think we're now, I made the mistake of kind of doing more of an interview style. I wanted to take a break because we're right about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you've explained a little bit for people who may not have listened to the Walk the Talk America podcast that was just the other day, or the Riding Shotgun with Charlie interview. Is there any other interviews that we would recommend people to go check out that you'd are proud of, or that did a good job explaining your position?
I don't know when I was on with Dan Foss's Overnights. So I don't remember what those dates those were.
Okay, yeah. I forgot
because those were some good long ones.
And
and M. Gabriel brought that up. So that really goes into a little bit more of it. And Jake with Walk the Talk America, really, from Zephyr Wellness, really goes into the whole thing on policy. So good catch on that. So that's where it comes in, the whole thing on the policy and the things like that. And so Pan Woods asked me, it's like, who inspires me in the 2A? Originally it was Ken Blanchard, Black Man with a Gun.
Interesting. I don't know if we've ever heard me before, but when I first started doing stuff online, I was looking around and thinking, what should I do? And I saw Ken, and I was like, I know what I'm doing online.
He's one of the original old gentlemen when it comes to this. Let's see, Cheryl from Gun Radio out of Arizona. Yes. Just with some of the stuff that she does, following what she does. The women from the DC Project, absolutely inspirational. And some of the newer ones, Rhonda, and I can't remember Rhonda's last name right now.
Rhonda Mary.
Rhonda Mary. Oh my God, I love her. She is going to be a rising star. She is incredible when it comes to 2A stuff. Absolutely incredible. And
doing it with like a surgeon's touch, but then also like style or whatever, but then in the places and in ways that no one's ever going to be able to achieve. It's really cool. Yeah.
She's really doing amazing work, both on on this through social media and things like that. She's really doing an incredible job on this.
Can you imagine? I mean, let me ask you, because I always have to talk to dudes all the time. So I know you're answering Woods' question here, but this is the nature of, we're going to ramble a little bit, I guess. What's it like in a world 2022? A little girl can have a Rhonda Mary and a Cheryl Todd that exist online and are active and are still doing their thing. And not only that, to say, oh, there's a role model I can look up to, but they're literally accessible. They could probably instant message them. You know, a little girl who aspires to whatever can instant message either one of those ladies, or we're using them as examples of all the other, you know, variety of ladies out there that are inspirational. And what's the result of that? You know what I'm saying?
It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. What has come from social media, and really, I had been involved in social media before, but not got more involved with it on the political side, with the 2A, with the advocacy and everything else. And to be able to reach out to some of these individuals, to some of these women, to some of these individuals is absolutely incredible. Inspirational. Everything else is just one of the things that really brings everything together. And you can find, it's easier to find your niche that way. It is so much easier to find your niche. And to find out, it's like, I don't have to be somebody who's a competitive shooter. I don't have to be somebody who is a lawyer speaking on a lot of these things. I can be somebody who wants to represent my community and wants to make sure that people are safe and people are educated. And that's where I think Rhonda comes in so powerfully. And then Cheryl, she's been doing this for years. Her resources are incredible on knowing who is in what state to be able to speak with in the particular state that you're in. Up until this March, my concern was I would be working a little bit on the national side. My focus was on Washington. And that's where I kept my focus.
For people that may not realize, we're talking Washington State all the time, not Washington, D.C.
Yes, I'm not concerned with D.C., which is the national stage. I'm concerned about Washington State, about the laws here and everything else. For 6 years, we fought and defeated every single gun control bill that had ever been submitted. This was the first year where it was slammed through against overwhelming documented opposition opposition to the magazine capacity. We had it confirmed over 15,000 Washington residents, which is 1 out of every 500 Washington residents had submitted against this bill. How long have I been in Washington? 2007. I decided that I needed a change of careers, sort of. I knew I was a graphic designer, creative director in that field for 20 years. And I knew that it was going by the wayside because I was on print production side for magazines, things like that. So instead of going to New York or to Los Angeles or to Chicago, I saw where else I could possibly go. I had done technical work before, so I came up to Seattle in 2007. And at another point, remind me, G-Webs, I have a very, very funny story about that trip, but we don't want to go into that right now.
About the trip to Washington State? Okay.
When I drove up from Phoenix to Washington, it was an adventure. So I've been in Washington since 2007. Because of my father's background, because of what he did, I am what's known as a bureau brat, similar to where much less number-wise than military. By the time I graduated from high school, I was in 15 different schools.
Okay, that was one of my questions that I was going to ask, as you were just talking before, but I didn't want to interrupt and do that. But I was going to ask, is being the daughter of an FBI agent like that the same as State Department or military? And it sounds like
very much so. Yeah. Very much so. There's very few of us. Even less.
I suspect it's even weirder because what are you going to say? Your dad's in the FBI, then everybody thinks you're James Bond.
And everyone's like, ew, what? Or like, wow, what is he doing? I'm like, yeah. When I was really, really little, I actually lied about it at one school, and I said that he was a garbage man. Because just didn't want to deal with was like, oh my God, your dad does what? Yeah, I didn't want to deal with it. My parents thought that was amusing. I picked like the most common thing out there that I thought was like a common job. So it's really, I have a definite different outlook than most people. The most I've ever lived in one place was Phoenix, where I actually graduated from high school. Washington right now is coming up on the second longest. For the most part, we never stayed in one place for more than 2.5 to 3 years at any given time when I was little. So went all over the country and the Caribbean. So, and let's see. So that's pretty much what I've got. Oh, how should we, PN Woods, how should we fight 1639 going forward? There is an initiative that is going around to try and get some of these gun control bills repealed. I don't recall the name of it. I'm sorry.
You mean the new lawsuit in Washington State?
Not the new lawsuit. This is an initiative. Washington has voter initiatives that can be, if you get enough signatures, you can get it on the ballot and force a vote. And there's also a way to force it to the legislature. So where the legislature has to take it up. And
with the ballot initiatives, and you basically just get enough gun shops to have these pieces of paper petitions, and then
and people to sign. Sign only once. There's no online signatures for the stuff. That this is not valid that way. You have to be registered to vote to sign. The majority of the people who are gathering signatures at various different places will have voter registration forms also. So that is key. Somebody who's going to be 18 by the time the general election comes can register the vote in Washington, even though they're 17, and then sign the petition. They do allow up until, if you're right before your 18th birthday, to start it up on that. Sporting Systems was involved with one from 2 years ago that Payne Woods may remember something about. This is a new one. This is one that came out, and Lori Theis with the Republican Party, and MJ Mullins, who is heavily active with the NRA, but she's also active with the Republican Party. And one of the legislators, and I apologize for not remembering his name at this point, I think it might be Robert Sutherland, which is a Washington State legislator. This is for the local one. This is what's coming out. They're the ones who have started this and working on getting this stuff. If people are interested in finding out about the petition, hit Washington Civil Rights Association on Facebook. There is a Discord channel. Let me get that link for you real quick, G-Webs. Let's see, invite people. I think I have a permalink. No, this will be for 7 days. Oh, no, I might be able to, yeah.
So while you're looking there, and since you're addressing Woods' question about this one, what's your position on, I don't know what to call, like if there's I don't know what the odds are of this one, so I don't want to put any connotation
Sure.
on it. But what's your position on working towards something like that, a ballot initiative or something that isn't a for sure thing? It isn't a guaranteed win. Period. Like, what's your opinion on? And because that's going to be one of the positions that people say either that's my reasoning for not participating, or that's why I'm going to second guess everything and wait. You know, I'm going to participate, but I'm going to wait until it's the sure win or it's the sure thing. So
we have to start. We have to start fighting back here in Washington. The initiative that happened a couple of years ago was a fiasco. We tried to salvage it, but the way it was done and everything was not going to go forward. This is actually being done by people who know the process, who understand the legislative and the initiative process. So yeah, going to supporting this one, 100%. We have to start somewhere. We have to get on the initiative. Meaning to be on the offense. We've been playing defense here in Washington too long, and this is what's caused us to lose ground. Washington State, for those who are not residents or maybe people who aren't aware of, was the first state to have state preemption, meaning that no local, county, city, or community law could be stricter against firearms than what the state law is. We're in the process of losing that here. They've had 2 open carry bills pass through very manipulative language. The particular legislator lied during the committee hearings. We have to be extremely careful in our response to such information. We can't directly address what they said, so we have to address it elsewhere. So we have to get on the offense. Washington is a Democrat supermajority state when it comes to the legislature, and meaning the House, the Senate, the governor, the Secretary of State, the state Supreme Court, and the state Attorney General are all Democrats, and they are all anti-gun. They will do what they can to violate the state and federal constitutions. They don't care. I have it on recording. Jamie Peterson, who is the senator out of the Cap Hill district in Seattle, saying he does not care that a young woman who is 18 to 20 from the initiative that became law 1639 would not be able to have a firearm at all. He didn't care. If she wants a firearm, she should join the military. That's his words. I have him on audio saying that during a town hall. They actively lie about the gun violence. And these are the same legislatures who have hobbled law enforcement in the state, meaning they cannot pursue criminals in active pursuit unless they see the crime happening directly. Currently in Seattle, and this was released through King 5 and I believe Cairo 7, which are the local stations, reported on this. Rapes are not being investigated in Seattle currently. There's an outside contractor, outside lab, who is finishing processing the backlog that had been about 15 years of rape kits. But right now, in 2022, from about February to March moving forward, rape is no longer being investigated for new cases. that's going to expand into other areas. These are the same legislators who had no issues with, when the lockdowns hit, had no issues in releasing violent criminals who went after their victims, who testified against them. I know of one rape victim who is in a wheelchair. Her rapist went after her a second and a third time after he was released due to preventing COVID in the prisons. Oh, what P.N. Woods was saying about we have gun violence here in Tacoma. Yes, we have gang and criminal violence here in Tacoma. Hosmer is a horrible area for this. It's a specific street, a couple of blocks. And yeah, it's a problem in South Tacoma. It does not help that the mayor of Tacoma, Victoria Woodward, has received political campaign backing by Bloomberg. She's been to his events. She has received monetary compensation for her campaigns to push gun control. The same thing with Ryan Moon. This is the individual who wrote the gun and ammo tax for Tacoma that is still on hold for a short time. They have to wait for the study to be completed. He is best friends with the Speaker of the House, Lori Jenkins. Lori Jenkins is rabidly anti-2A. She wants guns removed from everybody. She is a former public health attorney for King and Pierce County. Her wife works in the Attorney General's office, Bob Ferguson. So yes, and the best part is Bob Ferguson used to work for Bill Gates's father's law firm as a lawyer. So there is a whole thing when it comes to everything going on with this and finding out who's connected to what, who has the ability to have dinner conversations or after dinner conversations on how to get bills passed. Yes, those happen. So, and I know this type of communication happens in every state because I know it also happened in Arizona. And I knew a lot of the players in Arizona because of where I went to high school. And it's a who's who. 6 degrees, the whole game of 6 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon. Can you do maneuvers of who's who, who's connected to where? That is politics for you. And that is how everything, it all goes through. So who else wants questions? It looks like Daily Gun Show has something on there. So I'm trying to also pay attention to that. So yeah, P.N. Woods, yes, I understand. We do have a problem. It's a multifaceted thing that needs to be addressed. G-Webs will have me on at additional times, and we can go through how to be active on the political side at the city level, at the county level, and then at the state level, because that's my focus. National is a whole other thing.
Well, that's actually pretty interesting. So a couple of ways you brought it back to what I would want to chat about today was you and your motivations and your methodologies, right? So appreciate that you're in Washington. You've got a unique set of situations there, and Woods is where those, and you're addressing his questions. And it kind of went off there to talk about specifically a couple of the different, like, initiatives or campaigns or strategies that both sides are using. But what you kind of ended up there was talking about the, I don't know what to call that, like just the nature of politics, perhaps nature of everything, really. There's a certain amount of people that are going to be aware of a situation or the procedures or the, right? Like, and then there's the people that are adjacent to those people. And then there's the people that could care less. They pay somebody to take care of that for them, right? They elect someone to take care of that stuff so that they don't have to deal with it. And we live in a country where you're allowed to do that. So there's all these people that are like, well, nobody wants to deal with politics. Nobody wants to deal with laws. So I'm going to go over and deal with it. And I'm going to make a bunch of money doing it. And then there's the people that are aware of it and the people that are struggling. And if I'm summarizing it, well, if I'm summarizing it correctly, that's sort of what I was trying to ask, is the why you do what you're doing. It's because you're aware of that. And as I was trying to say there at the end there, your insight, your experience, I'm assuming made it difficult to just stand there and watch what was going on, knowing full well how it was happening, and that, there's things that can be done by individuals to divert that from happening, right? To just, prevent or at least create potential for opportunities besides that, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways people get involved. Get involved with your precinct committees. Things are divided down when it comes into politics. Yes, you have Republicans, Democrats, the Libertarians are your major, and the Green Party are your 4 major parties. These are the parties that will have a candidate on national ballots in all 50 states. Those are your major ones. You have your 2 big ones, and then you have your 2 minor ones. You also have some additional ones in various different states and things like that. So you get involved with your precinct. If you want to at least know what's going on, this will get you involved with your local district for your state legislature. And this is where, and also it will help with your county as well. Your county, your school board, and your city. This is where your taxes and your voice and your vote have the greatest power over everything. National, we vote on through the electoral system. You're talking millions of votes within a state to make a decision of where a selected few votes go to for the presidential. More people have a greater chance of deciding an election in the district on your state district than anything else. I mean, we're talking about sometimes where in some of the counties in Washington, they'll have 15,000 votes come in for a county. King County, Pierce County, Thurston County, Snohomish, and Spokane. Those are your major population areas. Oh, and Clark County with Vancouver. Those are your major population areas. Your votes, you're going to have more districts in those areas. So it's not that your vote's diluted. Your vote is determined within your district. And this is where they do the redistricting for how the votes are for what district you are in. This all matters because this is done every 10 years based upon the census. And that's how they redraw those lines. In Washington State, and I know in Arizona they have done this, and I know in, I believe, Wisconsin and Ohio are having issues also. The party in control controls how the districts are being done. It's supposed to be open up to both major parties and with somebody who is an independent. Pressure will get it so that parties lean heavy Democrat or where the districts will leave heavy Democrat or lean heavy Republican. It takes a strong person to have a district for the voting districts to remain independent of either party.
Okay, well, what we're talking about, or what you're describing, is one of the layers of where you can put action or effort into,
yes,
to affect change. But like you said, we'll
go dive into this on some other sites too.
Regular, one of your ambitions, and one of the reasons we're going to be chatting on the regular, is because our ambitions sort of align there. That our goal is to empower and inspire, and then offer resources for folks, create resources, together, and then with others, collaborate on some resources, and then make them available so that we basically offer what I would call like what we would have gotten civics class back in the day, or in government class or something back in the day. And we'll, like I say, we'll get into that more. So let me ask again. We've gone not quite an hour, about 45 minutes, kind of going off on different subjects, but to try to summarize on the why, you've explained a lot of it already. But if I had to stop everything and ask again the open-ended question, now that we have much more insight as to how you got to where you're at, and when you started, and the answering those questions about the organizations and the specifics about some of these recent things, being motivated to do it. And again, it's a lot easier. I always preface this when I ask this question about the why, is it's a lot easier to just sit there and watch other people do it or complain that it doesn't it doesn't happen. So again, you've done a lot and you've continued to do it when it wasn't easy or profitable or anything like that. So what is the why? What's your why?
If not me, who? Who's going to step up? I don't see a lot of people fully stepping up. I don't see people who are making, and a lot of people have lives. They can't. They're working. They don't have the ability to take time to do this. Policy advocacy work is a lot of work. During the legislative session, on top of a full-time job that I do, I would be doing another 60 to 70 hours a week of advocacy, of research, finding out what's being done, reaching out to individuals to see if they can speak. If they can't speak, find out who can. If they can't find, need to be available, need to know what the bills are, all the bills are, so that if somebody drops off because they can't make it, I can fill in and speak against the bill with very little prep time ahead of time, to be able to talk about the different laws, the histories, and the things like that. So that's how I became involved. And the few in Washington who do know, I have been very vocal. G-Webs, you know this. This year is the year I have to pull back. And when I say pull back, I have to pull back 98%. I cannot do the advocacy work that I've done before. Whereas during Pride, I would be at all the different Pride festivals in the Seattle, Tacoma area with a booth for Pink Pistols, start to finish, talking with people. Before the lockdowns and everything had happened, I had spoken to over 40,000 non-gun owners about firearm safety and about what your rights are in Washington. I can't do that anymore. The reason being is a medical reason. It was brought up during the interview with Jake and Mike from Walk Talk America. I have non-age related macular degeneration, which means that untreated, I will be going blind. I am under treatment, but it means I have to keep my blood pressure down. I can no longer be doing what I've been doing. So this is one of the reasons why I've said I would help G-Webs in getting this information out on how to be an activist, how to make your voice heard, so that you're not just typing on Facebook, typing on Twitter, what have you. You're able to actually have your voice heard and be able to defend your own rights.
So Patriots out there, Patriot in the Dark. I don't know if you've ever met or chatted with him. He's a Marine out of Michigan. Well, there's a lot of people up late. AR Guns is also up late, and we don't get bacon around here very often. I'm guessing he's saying that you're in his area also. And Gabriel, I think, jumped in as well. So, and then Sandhill Shooters was in here earlier. Have you met Sandhills?
Not sure if I have or not. Looks like he's based on this thing, Oklahoma or Nebraska.
That's a Nebraska, just a little goofy because he has a word above it. But yeah, that's a Nebraska. He's in. He's also works with the. What is it? N something. What is the Nebraska organization? It's red and it has NOSA or something.
Okay. Look. So, sorry for interrupting. Patriot in the Dark made a good point. A piece of the pie, you can do it. Yes. Everybody has a part that they can play in. And take that part, finesse it, make sure that their voice is heard. And NFOA, cool. It's probably Nebraska Firearms something of
Nebraska Firearms Owners Association.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Nearly every state has an organization that's at the forefront to have that's driving a lot of the defense of 2A and also knife rights, because knives are weapons under the Second Amendment also. There are a lot of really crazy, insane bills when it comes to knives. And in Washington, knives are not under state preemption. Every city, every jurisdiction can have its own law. Something to be aware of. And that's true on any state. States can have a multitude of multiple laws for knives and non-firearm devices. So discovering what a person can do and how listening to the different podcasts, listening to the different shows, following the different individuals, say Colin Noir, he puts a lot of really good information out on the national level. Sometimes he'll reference some of the others who are on a state level or something like that. So there's a lot of people who can help somebody. There are also a lot of people who claim to help, but do it for personal reasons, for making money for themselves. That's all I will say on that subject. Do be wary of those individuals. But the whole thing of why I do what I do, somebody needs to stand up. Not everybody has the ability to stand up against those who dehumanize an individual to prevent them from their human right of self-determination, which includes self-defense. That's just some of the stuff that's part of the reason why.
I appreciate you letting me give you an open-ended question like that, basically, and then just letting you, have a dead mic there for 20 minutes so that you had a chance to hit it from multiple ways. My goal is to just let activists have some time to do that, to just kind of freeform think about why, or let us know, and to maybe archive for yourself. I don't know if it's therapeutic or useful for yourself, but I appreciate you taking the time to let us know. Now, you didn't really talk about it too much, but you've got a very technical background. You're familiar and aware. You talked a little bit about the marketing side, but for anybody, it's adjacent to all the technical side of all of that. So understanding the tools and strategies and being familiar and experienced and capable with the tools, because anybody can know what Photoshop is and what it's capable of. It's a different thing to use the tool, right? So having that experience level and everything when you came to the table, my next question, and we've already gone an hour, but we already said we're probably going to go over an hour. So thank you, everybody.
That's fine. You know, I can talk.
Yeah, exactly. I'm only trying to keep it shorter for the podcast side. But again, I don't care really. But so let's talk how, because again, we're going to be chatting more in the future. So, you know, we can elaborate on stuff. So maybe like a bullet points or an outline. Since you knew what you were going to do, and now we have some insight as to why, and we've known what you've accomplished and worked on and stuff. When you kind of made that decision, or as you figured out you were doing it, I guess it's not, you don't always make the decision. You kind of figure out, oh, wait a minute, I am an activist. I'm doing this. What was your resources? What was your skill set? What did you bring to the table? And then I guess as you're answering, maybe include the stuff like what you intended to think you were going to need. Like, I figured I was going to need these tools and I ended up needing those tools. Or I thought I was going to need this skill set, and what I really needed was that skill set. And then I have a couple more questions to kind of, depending on how you go with this, but I want to leave it again open-ended. And I appreciate you being willing to answer this one. So how, and thanks. Yeah, how.
So the how is my background before I got into IT, because I am a network engineer. So when we were talking about on the technical side, I was a creative director for a direct mail franchise. So advertising, also with editorial design and layout. So communication and how to get a message out quickly. Visually, a picture says 1,000 words. How to get, and I started with 596 and dropping very, very graphic, not the typical Pro 2A imagery.
Now this when you're saying 596?
That's the, I think it's 596 or 594. I can't remember
that
at this
was
point.
The ballot initiative that gave you Washington State the assault weapons ban and the
594 gave us universal background checks. There are no legal private sales that do not happen within Washington State outside of direct family without going through an FFL.
Okay, so let me just, since you brought that up, and I totally missed there then. So there's more abuses than I realized. When you got to Washington State, what had already been in place? And then since you've been there, what kind of stuff have they hit you with?
Since I've been here, because before, when I moved up here, Washington was still good in 2007. I can't remember when 594 was pushed through. That's universal background checks. That was the big one. That was the first one. And then 16, and it took a lot of people. There was a huge fight against it. The Second Amendment Foundation, which is based here in Bellevue, Washington, which is across Lake Washington from Seattle, fought it hard. There was a concurrent bill that they were fighting up against that wasn't going to be as restrictive, but Bloomberg and Co. dropped, if I remember correctly, $10 million in the fight to push 594 in.
This is the one where Bloomberg bought like every marketing department and every...
That was the next one.
Okay.
That was the next one.
So this was just him warming up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was the first one. They wanted to see if they could get it through. They got it through. And the other side just didn't have the money to do the advertising, didn't have the money to get into the commercials and everything else. So it did not pass with that. The second one that came through was 1639. This is the one that codified within Washington the language that by the action of the firearm being a semi-automatic rifle is a assault weapon in Washington. It is codified in Washington law now that anything that has the action of you pull the trigger a round is fired and the gases and the mechanisms during the cycling remove the case and load up the next round to be fired in Washington is a legal assault weapon.
And you've just described like what Browning invented back in like 1901 or something, and it's been common for pretty much every gun except for lever actions and break opens. Pretty much that's every gun's operating system.
Yes, and you had to take a class in order to be able to show that you knew this whole thing. And this is the class that, for anybody who's in Washington, go online to sportingsystems.com. They have a class that's free that meets the criteria, that you hand the paperwork over after you print it out to the gun shop that you purchase your semi-automatic rifle from. Under 1639, a Ruger 1022 and a Marlin 60 are legally classified in Washington state as an assault weapon based upon that action. So that's part of 1639. The other part of 1639 is the increase of the background checks to include medical and mental health. In Washington, you already signed a waiver for all handguns to check medical and mental health. 1639 expanded that to semi-automatic rifles. There are other legal issues that go along with it. That's for another time. Jake and I discussed that with the Walk the Talk America podcast, a bit on that.
Why don't we say that that's a great way to send people over to that one, because you do talk about that. So let me, because I interrupted and I was asking you about the how. So you think you were about to start digging into it and then I sidetracked you.
No, I'm not going to go into the how. Jake and I discussed it on there because with him being
I mean the how when you decided to become an activist. Sorry,
so
I asking you about the laws and stuff. And that
was the thing. It was to fight. It was to fight these laws. It was to fight this stuff. So that's when I became the activist. I had been politically active when I was in Arizona. And this was just a continuation. It's like try to reach out to find out who I needed to connect with to be politically active here in Washington. Because when I came up here, I had no connections. I knew maybe 5 people. And that was it. And so that's...
And it wasn't like there was a bunch of people that were active and you just had to meet them. There was an absence of, it sounds like.
There was an absence of a method to connect to people, of the people who are actually active, going down on a continual basis. To be honest, those mornings when we were sitting around at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, freezing our tuchus off down in Olympia, you meet people and you would be talking, and then you would see them the next day and the next week. And then when the session closed and the session reopened, you would see them again. So that's how I met quite a few of the different people and things like that. So Goddamn Bacon's breaking up 2 points I want to address. You can conceal a pocket knife. You cannot conceal a knife larger. And I want to say one of the things is the way to make sure that it's legal within Seattle is the blade cannot be longer than your driver's license. The longest distance. That's a key way of doing it. Renton has a different law on what can be concealed and what is legal, and so does Kent. I don't know the particulars, but I know they are different. And yes, there was a bill back in 2017 that would have included a magazine capacity bill. What the magazine capacity bill that passed this year, that goes into effect July 1st, meaning anybody in Washington, you have less than 3 days to buy any of the standard capacity bills, standard capacity magazines before you can no longer buy any. Most of them had a deadline of midnight tonight in order to be able to ship them in time. Check your local stores. I know Weapons Outfitters has them. I know Sporting Systems has them. I know Sportco, Pistol Mary's, Pistol Mary's in Pistol Annie's in Bonnie Lake. She's got a bunch, and they have to have, the local shops have to have these sold before July 1st. They cannot ship them out. They're stuck with them. They cannot distribute them or anything else. It's so. Does the decision that just happened at SOCUS affect us? Possibly. I don't know the full details because the Duncan lawsuit out of California had made it through the 9th and was pending the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association decision for SOCUS. SOCUS has another few days before they decide to send it back to the 9th, not take it up, or put it on the calendar for next year, for their next session. There's several different things that can go on. The SOCUS blog, online on Twitter, as well as several of the other FPC. Obviously, everybody already knows where they are, who they are. Keep an eye on what they're saying on what the status is on that. So that's the details you want to be paying attention to, because what happens in the 9th, if the 9th Circuit makes a decision for California, it will affect Oregon and Washington State as well, because we are under the 9th. And if SOCUS does take this up and they go with the same text tradition scrutiny, then there's a good chance that the majority of the gun control bills that have been passed recently here in Washington will be null and void. I am not a lawyer. That's just my understanding.
But there's lawyers that'll jump all over whatever the potential is, right?
Yeah. And that's the potential. Double check with the actual lawyers who know this stuff. Robert Barnes. Sure, yeah.
Oh, no, I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
The lawyers, you want to pay attention to this. These are the guys who have gone to the Supreme Court, fought the state, fought the government, and won. Robert Barnes, Ron Coleman, Randy Barnett, Alan Gottlieb. These are the 4 lawyers that I know, hands down, know constitutional law and know how the Supreme Court is deciding things with the stuff going on. Ron Coleman is a wonderful old lawyer. He's the one who fought the U.S. Patent Office for the Asian punk band, the Slants, who were denied a trademark of their band name, saying that it was derogatory and racist. It was an Asian punk band. Ron Coleman took it to the Supreme Court with them, and they won. It can happen. The little guy can win. We just had the lawsuit, 6-3 decision for the Bremerton former football coach. And this was a First Amendment case. That case actually went up pretty fast, faster than some of the 2A lawsuits do. And I think that is based upon how the different states and the different courts take up these cases for that. But that was a First Amendment case that came up. The same thing with the Maine case in the which was a 9-0 decision, which was beautiful to see. And this was where Maine was preventing vouchers and state funding to go to religious schools that were already going to non-religious schools that were private. So, and they're like, nope, can't do that. You cannot discriminate against a religious school because they're teaching religion, whereas you're giving funding to state schools. So when you get more into some of this advocacy, you can see where it's not just a single 2A issue. The 2A and the rest of the Bill of Rights plus the 14th really impact each other. And the reason why I say the 14th, the more I've been studying on the 14th codifies and has the Bill of Rights apply to the states, not just the 10th. This is also dealing with some of the stuff that came up with the more politically diversive decision that came out the day or two after with the 2A decision against Casey and Roe. That's a discussion for another time on how that was decided and everything else. But the whole thing, text, tradition, and scrutiny. Yes, the courts previously have made bad decisions. Jorgensen v. Massachusetts, Buck v. Bell, Sullivan. I'm not happy that the case for Sullivan did not get overturned. Sullivan's a First Amendment dealing with newspapers and reporters and how defamation of character is done. It still indemnifies and prevents, say, the New York Times, the Washington Post from being sued for defamation on some very particular language. You discover as you're working in 2A how various laws are being put in there that are, I don't want to say backdoor, but they're sidesteps or tangents.
It's like shoehorns, right? Like, oh, 2A so bad, we're just going to really quickly make a law where 18-year-olds don't have rights anymore. Where
18 and 20-year-olds don't have rights, or where they violate due process. The whole set of due process, which is the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Well, that's what I was going to say, too, is when you were mentioning that, yeah, there's a whole bunch of amendments that get hit before the 2nd on a red flag, right?
Oh, yes. The 2nd is the last that gets hits with a red flag.
So we kind of went on tangents again, and I blame everybody out there that keeps typing stuff. A lot of times people type stuff, and whoever's the guest doesn't have any idea how to read the chat, so they're just oblivious, right? And then they're chatting along, but you're reading all the chat, so they're responding to them, which is fine, really. Who cares? But I had asked about the how. So you had this. You kind of mentioned that you had skill set. When you decided what you had available in where you could come to the table, it sounds like portions of it where you were the one who could be physically there.
Yes.
Was that, I had a question here, was that more of an, maybe this isn't the same thing, but this is going to lead me to this question. When you were, I don't know, as you were being an activist, I don't want to say as becoming, because like when you moved to Washington State and then, started as you were an activist, was it more of an issue from the motivation end and the management of relationships with others? And I'm assuming since you were in the game for a while, you were there for some people who were there forever as permanent fixtures, and then probably a lot more people that came and went, and then even more people that just briefly show up and say, hey, throw some money down, luckily, and then you never see them again. But, you have all these different people that you have to manage and work with and around and, in spite of sometimes. Was it more of a situation of managing wins, or was it an issue of like stopping the bleed losses, or was it something else? Am I picking bad?
Combination of both.
Okay.
It's a combination of both. It's a combination of managing the fact that we were there every single time, every single hearing for the first 6 years and fighting these gun control bills. We fought the assault weapons ban and the magazine capacity ban for 6 years and won. This was the 7th year that they submitted it, and they were going to push it through no matter what. My understanding, there was a lot of back-end discussions and push being done where legislators on the Democrat side in Washington were threatened with campaign election funds. If they voted against the bills, against what the party was pushing, the state party was pushing, they were not going to have funding for their campaign. That's the kind of dirty politics that we were fighting up against this time. And it was clear. The town halls and things like that, they were making statements that the heavy push that they were getting from the 2A community here in Washington was like nothing they had ever seen before. This was the 3rd year the Washington Civil Rights Association really was able to push hard and get people, not just like myself who had been down there every single time, but we were able to get new people to speak. Made it a lot easier with it being a remote session. People could set time during the workday or lunch to make the hearing, whereas before they couldn't make the 50-60 mile drive one way from Seattle to Olympia and be there in time for the hearing. So that's like the whole thing of managing the wins and also managing the bleed. Finding people who can speak, finding people who are eloquent, who can speak under pressure, who are willing to take guidance on how to speak during these sessions. That's huge. Not everyone is able to change their testimony on the fly and still have it be coherent to address what the other side is saying.
Like some people are there like, I'm going to be here because the swing sets are too high. And like, okay, we're here to make sure that the playgrounds are safe. So now they're talking about the merry-go-round. So why don't we address that the merry-go-round is an issue? And then the guy gets up and talks about the swing set.
That's really one of the great ways of dealing with it. Of how to describe it. And this is where you get the individuals like, my constitutional rights. Yes, I get it. We all do. Doesn't help. In fact, if anything, I have seen every single state legislator on both sides roll their eyes when they hear something like that, because that's all they've been hearing. When you make a statement to something like this, you need to make it personal. You need to make it how that law is going to penalize you as an individual or as a community. That's where it matters, because that's what the other side does. You have to bring in you're not bringing in the emotions. You're bringing in why this affects me. Here, I am your constituent. I vote. This bill will make my life dangerous. This is why. That is one of the approaches on how to stop these bills, because that's what the other side is using. And you have to counter and go on the offensive. Just saying my rights.
Well, let me ask this, because people that don't get involved, right, only get involved when they need to. And, I'm not scolding anybody. Should get involved in anything if they're not interested in it, right? We'd be a bunch of ninnies if we were worried about everything of everybody. So if people aren't familiar with it, the antis are doing stuff not because they're brilliant or they're super marketers. It's because they're watching what's successful for the tobacco industry or for medical or for fill in the blank
Yeah.
person trying to lobby or trying to get a bunch of people pissed off about something. They're just following recipes. And honestly, it sounds like they're following either recipes that are established and may or may not work because they don't care, or they're following stuff that intentionally kind of works because they'd rather keep playing tetherball than actually win a game ever.
Mm-hmm. And you have to see what moms against drunk drivers did. This is the same playbook on a lot of that stuff.
Are you pro or anti the strategy? Because I used to say, look at the way potheads got, because back in the day I used to have to say medical marijuana, but now it's recreational marijuana. I don't think there's like a marijuana magazine or like some marijuana superstar that got everybody going to concerts or somehow united against or united for changing the laws. Like somehow a bunch of people who get high and sit around got it to where almost all the states have medical marijuana potentially, and then a bunch of them have recreational, right?
There were actually several magazines that were actually against.
But in general, it's not like there was, this politician that rallied on the truth or something. Same with the moms against drunk driving. So I used to use those as my, why can't 2A be similar to that, but better, right? Because we got fundamental stuff and we're better and we got more people than Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So it's like we got the best of both worlds. But then I would get challenged because I've said this for many years. So I've got both challenged and praised for that. So where do you fall on you brought it up. So I'm assuming you're pro the Mothers Against Drunk Driving example.
I'm pro with the example because it's marketing. And this is me coming from a marketing background for 20 years.
Okay.
And with knowing how marketing is done and knowing how you can change the mindset and change the culture and bring in different things of how to approach somebody who isn't fully aware of what's going on. And that's a huge thing. And it's a huge part of it. And it's like, how do you reach? I mean, some of the imagery that I've created over the past however many years, the past decade, I'll see them sent back to me and it's like, hey, is this one of your designs? And I'm like, yeah, I don't label or name or tag 90% of the work that I do on purpose because it's in your face. It is done to make an image, to have an impact. We used to joke about the anti-drug ads on how silly they were. But I bet we all remember with the frying pan, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs, where they cracked the egg and the egg was your brain and they cracked the egg and the frying pan was your brain. We all, anybody who grew up during a certain time frame remembers that. We all laughed at it because it wasn't a well-done message to fight what was going on, what people were doing. And marketing has to be done in a way to make people think, to make people react, and to make people remember that, oh, wait a minute, there's a name that goes along with restricting rights. There's a woman who died because of that. So policy work with the activism is not easy. I was never paid for any of this. This was all volunteer work. I used my skills from being a graphic designer, from being a creative director, to craft some of the messages. Copy editing or writing editorial, writing the words. It's not my strong point. But I knew people who did it very, very well. I knew quotes that had been done very, very well. I used those in my imagery and put it on that way. So that's how I did that part. Terrace Kitchen is talking about how people are activisms and things like that. And a lot of people just focus as an activist. That is their job. They will find out a way. Yes, There is a lot of money.
She's got a couple of questions or points here. So this one, I think this is, unless I'm missing something, I think this is the beginning. The problem with activism is that most of the activists I know are employed as activists. They find every program and funding source to pay them and have a bunch of help from people without jobs. The rest of us work. Most of the activists I know are in the LGBT community, with a few in the gun community. The left seems to have a lot more people with free time that can organize. Well, I think that's an age thing too, right? Like if you've got the youth who are sitting around because they're youth, right? Then, I mean, I remember when I was a youth, I used to
and the retirees.
I didn't think about the retirees.
I think it's
retirees that have that inclination, because there's also retirees that don't got no inclination or ability. Right. So yeah, that lifestyle, that that's their social thing, or an element of their social thing.
Yeah, and it's a huge thing with this. You have people who are lost, who don't have anything else. They get involved with the March for Our Rights or things like that, and they'll have their travel paid for. They'll have their rooms paid for. They're not getting a salary, but it's like, oh, come here and we'll make sure that you're taken care of. There's ways of dealing with the stuff with activists that don't give them a salary. And the same thing with the retirees. And it's the same thing with the stay-at-home moms who are empty nesters, whose kids have gone off to college. Those are the most dangerous. Those are the ones who have the money and who are looking for something to do and will get involved with a political campaign or a particular thing with advocacy and go forward with it.
I don't want to, I mean, I agree with you, but I don't know if we should start another conversation about it or not. I don't know if I'm butchering Tara's comment, because I could be reading it wrong, or she might be driving or something and types it in a phone. I might be reading some of that backwards or upside down or something. But I don't agree. I don't, at least in my experience, at least because I don't have a lot of experience with activists on the anti-rights side. I only know people on the pro-gun owners' rights side. So most people I know who consider themselves activists do something for a living, and then their passion is their Second Amendment activism, I guess, and advocacy. Some people are writers, so their passion is writing a blog or books, right? Or, being involved as being able to be called an author or doing research. Just a lot of researchers out there. Now, some people have figured out ways to make it sort of a living or whatever, but more than likely they're just barely getting paid for the time they're putting into what they consider a passion and a drive, right? But most of the people I know are working. Like, there's very, very, very few that are not full-time something, and then they do activism beyond, not just on their free time beyond work, but then they have almost, who doesn't have a family and who doesn't have their own health and their own issues to deal with, their past, if they're paying off bills or whatever. So just all kinds of things are living off bad health decisions, right? And they're just not, they'd like to do stuff. They got the potential, but they're just not able to. So I'm just saying,
she's actually more correct. There are individuals who do receive a stipend. With that stipend, whether or not it be gift cards, it'll be something that'll help that they can exchange for something else. They are, when you think about it, if you could be in a place where you're going to be, if you get to a certain location, you wear a shirt, even if you don't speak, you're still there and you're going to type in saying that you're against a particular bill.
You're part of
You're being paid by
yeah.
food. You're being fed for the day. You might, you'll be fed breakfast. You'll be fed lunch at the end. You'll be driven down and you'll be driven back up to where your vehicle is or where light rail connection public transit is.
And it could be fun. And it's like your whole friends from bowling, or your friends from Scouts or whatever are going.
Yes. So you've got a bunch of people that you know, you've been down there before, and you're all talking, you're going to be there, and you're just sitting during the hearing and really where they come in on the busing is generally about, let's see, the doors open at 7:30, hearing starts at 10:30. They'll start showing up at 9. And then all of a sudden the line will go from maybe 50 people to 400 in a matter of minutes. Those are the individuals that are being bussed in. Now, there are several social groups that have a political advocacy that's a general political advocacy with them, that the and I call it, and this is my specific terminology in this, anybody who is for gun control, in my opinion, is anti-human rights, because they dehumanize the individual who wants to defend themselves and wants to prevent them from exercising their human right of self-determination.
I think they also create, like, especially we see now 18 to 21-year-olds have become a victim class. They cannot legally defend themselves, or at least it's perceived that way. And now a criminal knows they can go in there with a big stick with a nail on it and strong arm any, emancipated individual who had a poor
Not even
life.
Emancipated. 18, you are a legal adult. You
are. That's true. I keep saying that, but emancipated would be under 18, huh?
Under 18, an emancipated minor
goes to school. Military spouses, get married, and then the person's deployed. One or the other's deployed, and everybody knows they're deployed, and now they're left unarmed.
Yes, they're left defenseless if they're not living on base. There are laws that allow less lethal devices to be used by minors who are above the age of 13. Each state is different. Each individual will need to check their state laws. There are anti-bullying laws and things like that that can allow a minor to have a taser or a stun gun on them during school hours. It is very, very specific legal requirements in Washington state for this. If you know somebody who is being bullied horrifically and things like that, or being attacked, they need to talk to a lawyer who specializes in self-defense. This goes for any state. There are specific laws for stuff like this. That's another conversation for another time, but we were going for this for the minors. Yes, an emancipated minor, an adult, a young adult who is 18 to 20, somebody who is subject to jury duty, who must register with Select Service, who is legally signing a contract, who is able to vote.
Tried as an adult in court, right?
Yes, tried as an adult in court. You're out of the juvenile system once you turn 18. If you've been a foster child, a foster care system, once you turn 18, the state boots you out. You're an adult. 18 is that number. Yet all of a sudden, and the reason why it was dropped down for voting, because voting used to be 21, is because of the Vietnam War. And alcohol used to be 20. I remember when alcohol was 18. I miss being grandfathered on that when I was 17. I was not happy teenager on that part.
Yeah, the same life. It was changing to 18 and 21 as I was going to be like 16 and whatever. Luckily, a situation, all your friends are a year older and can drink, and they, you'd end up, you'd still live that life. But it's very much like the difference between the 70s and the 80s when you watch those.
Oh, yeah.
Movies and stuff. High school kids drank a lot, and then they didn't drink at all.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that goes along with this. And so when it comes with your activism, you have groups and organizations that are used to fundraising pre-internet. They are used to making phone calls, or used to making meetings, or used to making luncheons. In my opinion, the 2A needs to get into that. The 2A needs to work, and this is where the DC project is going to succeed where nothing else will. Because they are taking what has been done through the Junior League, through the Assistance League, which are the women who aged out of the Junior League. They are taking that and they're using that method of connecting women, whether they work or they don't, to be active in ways that they can be active, whether they work, whether they don't, whether they're a young mother, whether their kids are off to college. That's where the DC project's going to succeed, where nobody else has.
You kind of brought it around to one of the things I was going to say before, so appreciate that. And let me interrupt and say this then. So I don't disagree with the way up until now, or even now, that there's that element, especially if I say I don't disagree that there's the empty nester. I'm sure both sexes that have nothing else to do in time. But again, the DC, like you just said, the DC project, but also Armed Women of, it's the Armed Women of America. Right? No, it's the Armed Women of America now, and then the other organizations, and just in general, the Rhonda Mary, right? Like in general, the activists are more aware. There's more facets to the conversation. There's more people that are involved in different ways. So there's just so much to it that what they were sold with those empty nesters types, we're just going to characterize them all as the empty nesters now. So all those were sold. Gun owners are into violence. They hate other people. They're standing on their rights. And this old archaic, dusty, gotcha law, and then they're using that to stand their ground and murder people, and they're just the worst people ever. And then the same way that all we see is the weirdest extreme, at least I say we, most people I listen to, you go to one chat and everybody's complaining about some video. You go to the next chat, everybody's complaining about the same video. You go to the next conversation, everybody's talking about the same video. I'm sure if you went to the gun shop, everybody's talking about that video. It's the nature of viral, but nobody questions why we're all talking about this video and why we're all upset when things keep getting passed and why money keeps getting spent and why our representatives aren't doing. So anyway, because that was the old narrative, and the new narrative is the DC project, and fill in the blank, a million different people that represent the new gun owner. There's got to be less incentive. Plus, they got to be, and a lot of times, whoever that empty nester is, they're fighting themselves or the people across the street, where before it was an unknown phantom extremist. And I think that's what that meant. It's your show. That with that point out there, is that an element, or am I being?
No, it is an element. It is definitely an element. One of the things that I hear in a very, very pro gun control district is I'll hear the neighbors walking by and things like that, and they'll be talking about like, oh, we have to have this thing. I will do yard work with a shoulder holster. I will have a cardigan or something else, or like a hoodie on or something like that on, but I am armed with a Smith & Wesson M&P, and I'm doing yard work. The neighbors have seen me before the lockdowns pack up the car to do the booths for firearm safety. Halloween, I hand out suicide prevention information, not from Walk the Talk America, but from a Washington organization called Safer Homes, which is Forefront Suicide Prevention, which is a joint project with one of the gun control groups the woman got actually expelled out of her group for working with us on suicide prevention, and the Second Amendment Foundation. So because
they didn't want to talk about it, or
because they were working together. Because it was a joint project.
Friends of friends, we don't like that kind of thing.
Yes, yeah. So they did not. So the antis didn't like that this one particular woman was actually going to help find common ground to help reduce the firearm fatalities in Washington state are 70% suicide. To reduce that number will take some work. And with it being 70%, and it's been 70% or higher for several years. With that, didn't want to work together. And then I also hand out information on KidSafe Foundation. So this is Derek LeBlanc's organization where he teaches firearm safety and has an anti-bullying message to children. And it works. He has reached out. He has reached, I think the number now is 26,000 children in firearm safety. I don't know any other organization outside in a short time who has done the numbers that he has. And that includes doing firearm safety education in Hawaii with Hawaii's extremely restrictive current laws. He's been able to reach them on that. But
well,
this
is that the Eddie Eagle thing is available, and it was, you know, invented as an opportunity, as what's the word, like an attempt to prevent persecution from antis.
Yes.
So I remember when it happened.
Even
that it was
before
cool,
that.
But then, you know, it's been around for a while, so it's had sort of like ups and downs. People like it, they don't like it. It's been weird. It's been like out of touch. You know, it's been trendy. But the thing is, it's always been like a thing that's in the closet for an NRA sponsored event or whatever, or like a parade or something. But what Derek is doing is going out and intentionally trying to train kids or give kids awareness. And that's a little different. It's more of a fire safety versus we do fire safety at fairs, like, you know, having fire safety show up in a school and say, hey, it's Thursday and we're going to talk about fire safety versus if you go to the fair and they feel like it, then you have a fire safety demo if you walk over to that corner and look at it.
Yes, and some of the stuff that he actually has a blow up bouncy thing that he has a backstop
like
on it.
Inflatable range.
An inflatable range for BBs. And he does an incredible amount of work with that, with BBs to children, and
think about a
going
little kid who's like, oh, an inflatable house, you know, maybe big deal. I'm too old for that. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, 4. Shoot BB guns in it? Oh, wait, hold on, what? Yeah,
I've seen
cool for a little
4-year-olds shoot through this, and how he does it, and how the kids realize that they listen, and they act, and the whole thing with the fire. It's a start of the whole message. And he gets it out there with the parents and everything else. It's incredible to see the work he does. My husband and I RSO for when he does his Centralia, Washington events, which is about once a quarter. And that's more at the range, going through a whole other program different than the bouncy house with the BBs. And there's actually range time where he'll go through, and the kids end up shooting about 100 rounds of a 22 for this, and learning firearm safety and really focusing on it. And a couple of kids discover talents that they didn't think they had, and discover confidence that they didn't think they have. So, but this is just part of the whole thing. And this is where everybody working together in the community and supporting everybody, we can actually be more powerful than the antis. And this is where we, as not part of the NRA, not part of the GOA, not part of any of the actual organizations, it's where we as a firearms owner can change the culture and change the general mindset of things.
And not just about the gun ownership or like people's opinion about carrying guns around, but just the idea of like, when we champion the idea of what we're in favor of, what that creates is a safer society, a society where people had been apprehensive and literally scared to death about their neighbors and the property that they owned. Once they figure out, unfortunately, against their will and to some extent, at least against their pleasure, that their neighbors have that freedom and they experience it, what they'll experience is, we're talking 25% of the population lives in places where carrying a firearm is prohibited. So their world doesn't have people that carry guns. That means 75% of the population-ish, I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but about that number runs around knowing if they don't have a gun in their pocket, anybody else could. And all those people who would never have a gun in their pocket have to live with that reality. They know it. And it's just, you know what I'm saying, that hasn't happened for like 25% of the population. In a world where that 25% of the population chills out and figures out that that's not the end of the world, that's what we're talking about, right? Like that accomplishment makes us as individuals stronger because liberty wins and individual, like we're not afraid of our neighbors as much anymore. So that's what we're really championing. And that's why
and this is the danger of the individuals who say, I'm a gun owner, but. And this is where Giffords has gone with the gun owners, trying to get the gun owners involved with their specific gun control program and things like that. And these are the individuals who a lot in the 2A industry, in the 2A community, call your FUD. These are the ones who are individuals like, well, I was a vet, I don't see you need to have this. Most of the time, those individuals need to be pushed back politely outside of Twitter. I will be very honest, I am a absolute witch on Twitter. So, but getting into the community, showing that firearms are safe. One of the things that I do, I hand out either Derek's information for Kids Safe Foundation, including the how to be safe with children with firearms for Halloween, along with the candy. Every single child that comes to the house for Halloween gets, first of all, full-size candy bar, because I believe in that. Secondly, they get a flyer for Kids Safe Foundation or for Safer Homes for suicide prevention. Every single one.
Anybody complain or say anything or say things?
I've seen only 2 things crumpled in the yard, like thrown away. It's like, oh, don't like this, threw it at the house. That's it. Because Kids Safe Foundation and Safer Homes are for suicide prevention and for safety. No. Because I'm trying to make sure that the parents also have the information how to keep your child safe. That's all what any parent wants.
Yeah.
They want to keep their child safe. How are you going to keep your child safe? You keep your child safe not by keeping something that is in the majority of the country. You're not going to ignore it. There are more guns in this country than there are people. Hands down. I think the latest numbers, there's over 600 million firearms in this country that they know of. And there's only 360 million people in the United States. Yeah. So this is where pushing the safety. Now, in the 1970s, and this is the whole thing, everybody knows of Cooper's 4 rules of firearm safety. When you take a look at the hard numbers of accidental firearm fatalities, they used to be in the tens of thousands. Now, they're less than 500 a year. That was the firearms community taking the initiative to be safe.
And just, yeah, and literally that's what it was. I mean, that's one of my projects, and one of the things we'll be collaborating on going forward here is getting that stuff ready for prime time. But yeah, there's literally, you can chart. I think, I don't want to say because I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, perhaps because the sources I'm looking at it are pro rights. But a lot of times these are done in anticipation of a campaign against us or something,
Yes.
where they're done to strengthen or bolster our side, and the result is like basically having, for example, a safety manual in the box. Not that everybody needs it or everybody wants it or something, but some people are apprehensive or some people are just inexperienced and some people need it. What also happens is that safety manual gets taken out and laid there, and some kid reads it who isn't ready for a gun yet, but they now read a safety manual because they got nothing else to do, and to them that's like super cool to look at, right? Or somebody read it when they're bored at a dentist's office because it was laying there, whatever, right? So that, what does that do? That trickles around the community, and there's more awareness. When there's more awareness, right, when TV, movies, all that creates apprehension, people aren't as apt to just pick up a gun and start pointing and pulling triggers. Like people just figure that stuff out. So I mean, a lot of it was intentional, some of it was harder to track like that, but you also have the internet. How are things going to change with the internet? I mean, look at the prevalence of SBRs, short AR-15 pistols, AK pistols, Glock things, all these things with braces on them. If people were as reckless and as unsafe and as potentially dangerous, I mean, with a rifle thing, the size is just, I mean, could you think of a more dangerous thing than to put rifle caliber stuff with high capacity in a very short thing that the barrel is 7 inches long on? Where do you see scourges of accidents or unintentional or even deliberate? Like, and these things have always existed. Humans just aren't that mean to each other. Like, there's a couple of individuals that are super mean to each other, and there's ways to address that. But what we're doing is we're eliminating this idea that gun owners can be marginalized into taking the blame or the burden of all of those intentional bad people every single time they feel like it.
Yeah. So one of the other things, and because we're getting up to the 2-hour mark, and I think we're going to, and we can probably kind of close this up, because I know you and I talked about having me on coming again, and I promise we won't be going as long, hopefully.
We will.
So one of the things that when people are talking about and being aware of this is if somebody sees a anti or somebody who's repeating the whole, gun deaths and this and that, I will try to make sure that, and there is documentation, and I know I've put it out, and I know there's others who have put it out. There are actual breakdowns, and I know for 2017, down to the city of the top 5 cities where firearm fatalities that are not suicide are occurring. When you overlay the maps of what suicide is, along with firearm ownership, you're going to see it's more the pro-2A states, more the pro-gun states, because it's suicide. On average, 60 to 75% of firearm fatalities are suicide. Those suicides are tied to rural, white, older men, or police, law enforcement, and military and veterans. Those are the individuals who are committing suicide via a firearm. And that is a very, very specific group. Suicide is rising exponentially right now. It used to be that firearms were 60 and 70% of suicides. Not just firearm fatalities being of suicide, but the suicides were firearm fatalities. We are now at parity with non-firearm fatalities. So hanging, stabbing, or slicing your wrists, I should say, known overdose, asphyxiation are now 49.5%, if not higher, for suicides. And the other ones are firearm fatalities. What they can't designate on this are your opioid and fentanyl overdoses. They can't tie those to suicide all the time. And sometimes it's not done because of insurance and religious reasons.
Family family doesn't want to talk about it. It's like their business or whatever.
The family doesn't want to talk about it. And what a lot of people don't realize, and I believe this is also within Islam, but I know for a fact, if an individual is Catholic and Christian and Jewish, if they commit suicide, they cannot have a religious burial because it is considered to be a sin against God. And they are buried on unhallowed ground. So the death certificate, for that reason, will not say suicide. Unless they can show to the priest, to the rabbi, and maybe to the imam that that person was under severe mental stress and was not in the right mind. That's how you get the religious burial. For the insurance purposes, there are clauses that prevent payouts of a insurance policy on the death of an individual is prevented, or they don't receive any of the payout if it was a suicide. Two major things. And that's the reason why a lot of the opioids and a lot of the others, unless it's an obvious thing, will not always be tagged as suicide for that reason. You have chronic pain patients who are in extreme pain. You have individuals who are despondent and things like that, who will overdose. And that will look as an overdose, not as a suicide. The suicide numbers in this country are significantly higher than what is actually reported.
Well, the idea here is, though, is that by using the gun owner or the gun as a scapegoat, what they're really doing is taking time and attention that could be used to create either more awareness or operate hotlines or help people who are in the most risk,
mental health,
not have to deal with whatever it is that gets them into that level of stress. But those are things that would, well, one, I guess some people say they don't sound as sexy for re-election, although I don't believe that, because they can, if they're good at being a politician, then they can let people know this is what we're working at. This is a real solution. But in other words, for whatever reasons they don't do it, I think it's more of the tetherball game. They'd rather keep playing tetherball than win, because then they have to figure out something else to do. But I think that that's the tendency of the people playing tetherball. But the way you have influence is by not watching them play tetherball anymore. They can only play tetherball. That's, I'm using that as an analogy. You could say ping pong. You could say whatever. There's the two-sided game that the two parties or the people on both sides of any issue want to play, because they're probably profiting off the people who have some skin in the game. So they don't have any skin in the game. They can profit off of everybody who does, because they can dangle over whatever. Well, we walk away from them. They have less and less ability to, they're going to have less and less reason to want to play with that particular song or, play with our particular issue. And that's where I think we're winning with, again, going back to the DC Project and just awareness in general and some of the stuff you've mentioned too. By winning, we set precedent to the other side that we're not laying down and just taking it anymore. We're changing who we are. And, lots of stuff we get off in a topic. So, again, we're trying to end this at around 2 hours here. I asked a question to the audience who was watching live. We've had a lot of people joining us, but it is late. And for us on the east, or the West Coast.
West Coast.
I kind of flop back and forth because I'm in Arizona and our time zone changes kind of.
No, your time doesn't change.
Well,
I wish we didn't change. God, I miss that.
Well, everybody says that, but the problem is that, correct, we don't move, but everybody else moves around us. So effectively, we shift, our whole world shift by an hour every once in a while.
Yeah.
But in any case, I'm on your time now. It's only 11 o'clock for us, and you work overnight without getting into too much detail. So I appreciate you taking the time. But for those of you who are watching live, again, thanks for staying up late and participating in the chat out there. There was a poll. We got a bunch of people answering it. Just to have something completely off topic as a palate cleanser. I don't think I've ever asked or heard you talk about this before. What would you choose as your best pizza option? Would it be a Chicago style, a New York style, or a Detroit style, or some other thing entirely?
I'm a New York girl. I make a New York pizza. I make my own pizza. I make my own dough. I make my own sauce, get fresh mozzarella, and it's mozzarella and provolone. And I'm the New York style. Thin crust. I will take a St. Louis also.
Oh, what's St. Louis then?
Oh, St. Louis is beautiful. It's a little bit different. It's got, the cheese is a very different type of a cheese. Very, very thin.
It's starting out like a New York though, a thin.
It's a very thin. It's almost like a cracker crust. But a St. Louis style pizza, oh, it's delicious. It's wonderful. But I'm a New York girl for types of pizza. I will take a good deep dish Chicago, and everyone's going to hate half of everyone's going to hate me. There is no pineapple on pizza. That's not a pizza.
Yeah, that's not half of people. That's just a weird minority of people that are vocal about it. But yeah, I hear you. I don't like sweet stuff in any of my food, but I definitely
I'm pretty much a pure cheese, because that's going to tell you if it's a good pie. That's going to tell you if the crust is good, the sauce is good, the cheese is good. If you start throwing the meats on it and you start throwing everything else on it, you obscure the quality of the ingredients. So, what Tara was talking about, hospice nurse OD, yes, that happens all the time. All the time. There is a lot of there are known serial killers who work in hospice and work in hospitals who murder patients. That happens here in the United States. They've had cases, they have caught individuals in the United Kingdom, in France, and in Germany that I'm aware of. And I would not be surprised if it's in other countries. So, yeah, we'll definitely talk about this. If people have things that they want me to focus on more specific, they'll let you know.
Yeah, I wanted this one to be a little bit more
organic
or whatever, only because I try to do my first interview with somebody so that you get an opportunity to say this is a chat where, like you said, you're going to have a whole bunch of interviews over a span of doing stuff. This is the one you can say, oh, I had some time to just get into it in this one. Although, like you say, you're more than willing to chat. So I'm sure you've got others that you've elaborated on. Like you say, the ones with Foss are awesome chats, really, really awesome chats. I'd highly recommend.
Long.
People that listen to this show are usually working shift work. They're downloading a podcast. They're downloading the audio. Drivers, people that are doing something where they put the headphones in and do something for a while. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is definitely the one from Foss. You're probably already aware of this if you're listening to my channel, but if you're not, this DM Foss is a guy on YouTube who has a couple. He does an overnight show on Saturday nights, overnight Sunday mornings, and that's where we started chatting.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I'll put a link to the after chat for people that want to jump in after, because I'm sure unless you're jumping off, then we can chat off.
No, I can stick around for probably about a half an hour.
Okay. Well, let me ask you then one more question just to wrap this one up and to hopefully make it optimistic. I do have a bunch of them here, so I'll use some of these for other chats though in the future. But what realistic changes would you suggest to the 2A activist community in 2022? If everybody who were at AmCon and you had the stage, everybody was like, shut up, listen, and they all did, right? What realistic changes would you suggest to everybody at Gun Rights Policy and everybody listening at home who considers themselves activists? What realistic changes would we do?
Keep focusing on the local. That's where we're winning. Even though Washington has had some serious setbacks, we've also been fighting hard. Keep focusing on the local, keep focusing on the county, keep focusing on the state. We have 25 states with constitutional carry. That was not heard of 10 years ago. That's all within the last 10 years. Keep focusing on the states, and you keep changing on the states. Doesn't matter what the federal does. because you can fight the federal. And this is where the equivalent of marijuana laws come into play. If the local, county, and state are not going to facilitate federal law enforcement on the enforcement of federal laws, federal gun control fails. Changing the county and the state laws is where it matters. Win at the state, win at the local. We are a republic of 50 countries for all intents purposes. 50 states. Our states are where our power is. Change the states, change the country.
Right on. I appreciate your time again, and we'll chat again. Look forward to that. Oh, I was going to say one of the things that we had talked about, and I appreciate again your opportunity, is that you're going to be helping me to get some of my attempts at publishing what we have on the websites ready for prime time. So that's some of the stuff we'll be chatting about in future ones. I'll be getting you that draft or whatever, so you can check it out. But again, thanks to everybody who watched us live. If you're listening to us in the future, wherever the platform is, if it's a video or if it's an audio platform, there'll be links to Sharyn's interviews and to some project links that we talked about tonight. Thanks to DJ for dropping links as we've been live. And I'll put a quick commercial in here for our store. Thanks to everybody who grabs stuff from our store. It makes us possible to do this stuff. And there's been a banner at the bottom of the screen all night thanking our Patreons, the 149 people that make it possible for me to spend time on things like this without trying to sell you a grip angle or a red dot scope or try to buy, sell you nothing. So thanks again for joining us live. We'll be back to pick you up later.
GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.
The guys and gals at GunWebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice once a month, and carry every day.
Thank you for watching Gun Websites.